Winter Roses, Autumn by Fairytalelovr, Chapter 10. Marjorie knocked on her grandmother's door, being admitted quickly. She and Garland had arrived earlier in the day, finally, and she was happy to be warm again. Thankfully, Rob said Winterfell didn't get as cold as the wall, and the castle was quite warm. "So," Elena asked once they had hugged, "how was it?" "The marriage is secured, grandmother, and I managed to impress on him the need to share everything with me. He said he loves me." The Queen of Thorns narrowed her eyes. "Well, that is good. Very good, I think, since you fell in love with him as well." "Grandmother?" "Don't, my dear. Don't bother. I am old enough to know what I see. You fell in love with the boy, which is good since you will have to spend the rest of your life with him. Just to make sure it doesn't blind you." "I won't, grandmother. I promise." "Good. What about the others?" "So many things happened, grandmother, but the most unbelievable of all, well, there are two unbelievable things. First, White Walkers are real." "Don't be silly, Marjorie." Olenna laughed. "White Walkers are a nursery story." "No, grandmother. They are very real. Rob saw them. He fought them. It was bragging. It has to be, my love." "Well, it was convincing enough that it got Lord Stark and the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch to let the wildlings south of the wall." Olenna blanched. "That is indeed unbelievable, and a problem no one ever anticipated. Lord Stark will have to have hard proof if he intends to rally the kingdoms against these fairy tale monsters." "I'm certain Lord Stark has a plan," Marjorie said diplomatically. "I saw a White, one of their foot soldiers." She shivered. "It was dead already, but trust me, we do not want it crossing south." "And the second unbelievable thing?" Olenna asked. "Oh, that," Marjorie bit back a smile, anticipating her grandmother's reaction. "Lord Starling was stabbed through the heart." "What?" "Oh, do not worry, grandmother. He is well." "Well? How? How can he be well?" "Actually, he was only dead for a bit over a day." Marjorie was having a hard time hiding her amusement now. Olenna hit the table. "Stop with the suspense and tell me already! What magic did they conjure?" Chuckling, Marjorie began the story. By the end, Olenna was even more certain that the alliance with House Stark had been the best idea they ever could have had. Maester Marwyn sat on his desk, contemplating the words he had just read. The day was warm, though the weather was visibly cooling, even in the south. The northern messenger had delivered it to his hands, only in his private solar, saying Maester Luwin had recommended discretion. He remembered Luwin, one of the few who had forged a Valyrian steel link, who had studied the higher mysteries. Marwyn was not stupid. He had known since the beginning, when he first began forging his own dragon steel link, when he was but a silly boy, that the Order of Maesters hated magic. He knew his appointment to Archmaester was because the rules of the own capital dictated that there should be an Archmaester for every area of study. And after the third coincidence, he had realized the Sessionel was appointing his students to serve castles. The young men who started to forge their Valyrian steel links, and would therefore be unable to complete their links, or even continue their studies in this area. But to imagine a conspiracy of this magnitude! The letter from Winterfell had come with a copy of a passage from the late Mr. Wallace's journal. He rubbed his temple. Lord Stark would be well within his rights to call for a war against the Citadel. But the way Luwin had requested discretion, Marwyn imagined that wasn't what the hand of the king wanted. But then again, the ease with which the journal had been discovered, the carelessness. He needed to investigate. He needed to check the facts. As careless and conceited as his colleagues were, he doubted there was a list of conspirators. or that said a list, if existed, would be easily attainable or easily able to read. So perhaps he could luck out like Lewin did. He rung the little bell, calling for the acolyte in the next room. The boy came quickly. "Alaris, I have a problem in my hands. One I need solved. I know you only just started your studies in the higher mysteries, but I need to know if I can trust you. If you will help me in this venture." "Of course, Archmaester," the boy answered. "Good. The beginning should be very boring. Very boring indeed. But if I am right, oh, if I am right, the payoff should change the world as we see it." "What do you need me to do, Archmaester?" "I will go to the Sessionel and say I am giving you an ungrateful task. It's not unusual when an acolyte has misbehaved, or experimented just a bit too much over the line, that we punish him by having him make copies. Boring stuff, but thought of as sufficient punishment. Then I shall grab the things I want to read, though I cannot have everyone knowing I am reading them. And while you copy, I will read, and see if I can prove or disprove something." Alaris thought it was very boring indeed, but decided against voicing it. From the gossip around the realm, the dragon eggs Daenerys Targaryen had, the volcano erupting for the second time in so many months. It would soon be very interesting to have a Valyrian steel link on a maester's chain, and only Archmaester Marwyn could grant that. "Of course, Maester. Whatever you need." "Good, good," the older man said, standing up. "Let's get started, then." Oberyn drummed his fingers on the table, waiting impatiently. He stayed in Starfall long enough to help Edric deal with the backlash of Maester Corlys's betrayal and death. But it had been easy. Though young, Lord Dane was smart and intelligent, and once the shock had worn off, he had taken the reins of the situation quite nicely. The prince still thought he was too honourable and correct for the madness of politics he had to deal with, but that would come with age and practice. After all, even Arthur, from the height of his honour, had accepted to participate in the deception of his death. "Father," Sorella finally came, sitting across from him, "you know we shouldn't be meeting." "I do," he greeted, "but it's important. I missed you too, for that matter." She smiled. "I miss you terribly, Father. And I did tell you that I could pull it off." "Hey, don't be like that. I was the only one who didn't think it was madness. If anyone could pull off pretending to be a boy to study in the Citadel, one of my girls could." "Anyway, what is so important? Or are you just travelling?" "I got a word of a conspiracy." "Let me guess. Lord Stark and Lady Ashara Dane's baby?" "They've gotten wind of it?" Oberyn asked, now worried. That was their advantage, that the maesters weren't aware they had been caught. The maester at Winterfell wrote to Archmaester Marwyn. "Marwyn? The Mastiff? Please, Father, who can they be sure is not involved in an anti-magic conspiracy?" "You're right," he conceded. "Have you found anything yet?" Sorella smiled. "The only reason I didn't write is because you said you were already on your way. Oh, Father, it will blow you away." It wasn't as hard to leave Winterfell this time as it had been the first time. Now Jon already knew and longed for his home, his own castle. He would always miss Winterfell, but as a childhood memory and his father's home. "Do you really think this will be a good idea?" Isla asked, coming nearer to where he stood adjusting Winterstorm's new saddle. "I think it's a splendid idea," he answered with a smile. "Come on, you were hovering over Eyrie and the saddle maker the entire time. Besides, I've never let anything happen." I know, she huffed. "But what if she can't last the entire day?" "Then I'll notice and I'll ask them to stop, and I'll deliver her right into your loving and eager arms. How does that sound?" Jon was smiling now. Isla was very overprotective. "But she's barely past her second name day." "Aunt, John turned and held onto her hand. Leah will be fine. I promise. It's not the first time she's gone riding, and Iri says Dothraki children start riding still at their mother's breasts. There is no reason why Leah can't do the same. The saddle will keep her in place as we ride, and I will be holding her. I know. Fine, I am being overzealous. I know. There's no such thing as overzealousness when it comes to your granddaughter. John kissed her cheek. I'll go get Lyanna. John, Isla called, can you try and not just to ride fast? I mean, keep a slow pace? He chuckled. Sorry, Aunt, but I shouldn't make promises I already know I won't keep. And now Isla was even more anxious. She knew, obviously, that John would never allow anything to ever harm Lyanna. But when riding at speed, who knows what could happen? She was too little to hold on by herself, and one little slip, a torn sleeve, could mean that John lost his grip on her. You worry too much, love, Benjen said, coming closer with a smile. Lyanna will be fine. I know, Isla said. It's just... Oh, come on, you know how fast he goes atop that horse. He is just like his mother, forever chasing this thrill of speed. And if... I know all of that. I also know that John would throw himself on Winterstorm's back before he let Leah so much as waver from side to side. I know, she whined, and he hugged her. It's just... After seeing that scar and the nursery attack... Hey, Benjen called, pulling her chin to look up. We've redoubled the guards and the attention, and John will keep Leah safe. Besides, I wouldn't put it past the direwolves to ride so close to Winterstorm that if she were to fall, she would fall on them. Isla chuckled, but was finally reassured. Ella watched them from afar, standing with Ned next to the carriage. I'm very glad I don't need to have that argument with you, she said. Ned chuckled. I am not that much of a horse enthusiast to put the children in the saddle when they're so young. I wish John wouldn't either, quite honestly. At least he isn't trying to take little Adam too. Well, he is his mother's son, Ella said, and Daenerys is her brother's sister, as she seems only too happy with the whole idea. Well, I'm not, Ned complained. I'd sleep easier if Lyanna was inside the carriage with you, Isla, and the other children. I think by the time we go to sleep, you will either loathe the idea, or you'll have gotten used to it. He only rolled his eyes and helped her inside, then gave his hand to Sansa. Bertha brought Cregan and Rickon, and Benjen helped Isla and Rickard inside. Ready to go? The youngest brother asked. Ready to send them a raven to solve their own problems. That's more like it, Ned muttered. Benjen chuckled, and they each went to their horses. Lyanna drew everyone's attention by laughing loudly as Daenerys passed her to a mounted John, and they strapped the girl onto the saddle. Dany had had a toddler version of riding clothes made, so Lyanna looked very daring in her leathers and blue cloak. Lady Starling herself had a new travelling outfit made, one with grey leather leggings and boots underneath a long-sleeved blue dress that opened in slits at her hips, reaching the middle of her calves. She was mixing the practicality of leather leggings to ride and the dress, the attire appropriate to women. The entire courtyard had risen in whispers the moment she had appeared, of course, and more than one lady was looking on appreciatively. With everyone ready, Ned led the group out of the courtyard. He hesitated at the gate, but pressed his heels onto the flank of his steed, prompting him into moving once more, refusing to look back. I will be back soon, he promised himself, as Silver fell into step. Together, he and his new companion rode down the winding road that led to the King's Road. On the deck of the Lady Daenerys, Jon felt a warm wave of happiness take over his heart as the black castle appeared in the horizon. It's an imposing view, Ned said. It is, Jon agreed, and I'll never be able to thank you enough for choosing it for us. Well, Ned shrugged, uncomfortable.
It had been empty for too long, and it's too beautiful to go to waste.
John chuckled. Are you sure you don't want to stay? Just for a few days, Father?
I've been away from the capital for too long already, John. You know that. I have a duty to this realm.
I know. But you've been away for so long that 5 days won't make a difference. Please, Father, you never celebrate your own name day.
Ella put you up to this, didn't she?
Ned asked.
I told her I didn't want to do anything. I haven't. I don't even remember the last time I celebrated,
he said, though he knew it was a lie, but guilt still ate at him, so he just ignored it.
Last year, of course, John smiled. Last year Ella ambushed me with a special dinner. Why should it matter?
Why shouldn't it matter, Father? Please, it's only 5 days. Please, Grandpa? Lyanna said, coming up to them unnoticed, grabbing onto Ned's legs. He chuckled, picking her up.
Now that is a low trick,
he said, smiling back at his beautiful granddaughter.
How can I say no to you?
Yay! She exclaimed, and then wiggled to be put down and rushed back to the main deck where the women were gathered.
She lives up to her name,
Ned said quietly, watching her go.
You never speak of her.
John spoke just as quietly.
I fought a war to free her, to save her. I failed.
He was silent for a moment, and then turned back to John.
Very well, I'll stay. 5 days only, but make it a small dinner, John, just family.
Why don't you like to celebrate your name day, Father?
He shrugged. For years there was nothing to celebrate, but I suppose it's fine now. Your uncle did tell me to stop. It doesn't matter.
Stop blaming yourself and feeling guilty for things that are done and over with, Benjamin had said.
As if it were so simple,
Ned thought. He turned and walked down to the quarterdeck as well. John frowned and turned quickly when he heard Adam coming to the other side.
It's guilt, what he feels, the knight said. Guilt or melancholy. Not so sure.
Why? Adam took a moment to organise his answer.
I told you once. I was with him when he first met you. After your mother died, he was sad, obviously. He got you a nurse and everything you needed, but the world had just fallen apart for him. That's why I think he doesn't particularly want to celebrate it here.
Why does the where make any difference? John asked.
Because the day you were born, he'd held on to you for the whole day, barely letting you go long enough to be fed. And then he didn't hold you again for almost a whole moon.
Lyanna had mentioned she wanted to get him a name day present when it was all over.
She remembered the date coming closer, so I knew the when. I yelled and bullied him during the entire day, telling him to man up and stop crying over the mess the world had become.
Did it work? John asked, unsure of how exactly he felt about that.
No. Rather, he spent the rest of the day locked up in his chambers. 3 days later, it was your first moon, and I'd already wanted to make something to mark the occasion. So she thought to join both things. And, well, you know her. She went into that solar, and I don't know what she told him, but he came out looking like a puppy who knew he had done something wrong, and he asked me if he could hold you. Quite an achievement, considering she was only your wet nurse at the time, and not even a long-time family servant. But I think that's why he remembers when he remembers his name day. How stupid he was back then, and how he let guilt and shame and hopelessness consume him, and keep him away from his son for a whole moon.
John looked back at the Midnight Fortress, drawing ever nearer. His thoughts a jumbled mess. John sighed in pure happiness as he threw himself back onto their bed.
Home, sweet home, he exclaimed, and Danny chuckled. I feel like I've been travelling for years.
Well, it was a bit over a half year, she said softly. John sat up and looked seriously at her.
You've been sad and withdrawn since White Harbour, he said. I think I know why, but I would like you to talk to me about it.
Danny sighed. There is nothing to talk about.
You're an awful liar, Danny. You're the one who nags me about talking when I'm the one closed off. So, come on. My turn, he said, extending his hand towards her. Talk to me, my beautiful wife.
Oh, you, she said, taking his hand, chuckling as he pulled her to sit on his lap. It's nothing, she blushed under his stern look. I know that every woman is different. I guess I'm just a tiny bit jealous.
Danny, you nearly died when little Adam was born. Your body's going to take a bit longer to recover from that.
I know. It's just, I am happy for them. I am. I know jealousy's an ugly feeling. I don't wish they wouldn't. Ella, Father, Aunt Isla, and Uncle Benjamin deserve their babies. So I am thrilled that they are both with child. It's just, I wanted us to have another one too.
We will, Danny. We will. But your body went through an ordeal. Our baby was born early. And then you were under a lot of stress, going up to the wall and with what happened to me, John said, and she rested a hand over the scar on his chest, hidden beneath his clothes. Don't ask too much of yourself, Danny. It will happen when it needs to happen. Look at the gaps between my siblings.
I know. I suppose I am greedy. I want to fill this castle with our children.
We will, John insisted. We'll have so many kids that you will end up hating me and sending me to sleep elsewhere. They both laughed. You need to let it happen, Danny. I'm no maester, but I'm quite sure stress is not good.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
It isn't good for anything. Why would it be good for this?
Danny laughed, the black cloud dissipating.
Now, John smirked, what do you say we put in some practice? For trying purposes, of course.
Practice? Right. She laughed, but John captured her lips in a kiss, and she forgot why she had been upset in the first place. In the morning, when she had to suffer under Eerie and Araya's smirks at her torn laces, she felt lighter than she had ever since Winterfell. John asked Danny, Isla, and Ella to keep the name day dinner small. Really, family only. On the days since the ship, he had thought long and hard about what Adam had told him. And though he did feel hurt, his days of gnawing on the point had brought him some clarity. He tried to put himself in his father's place, as abstract and far-off idea had seemed to him. His sister vanished, allegedly kidnapped and raped, his father and brother murdered by a madman who had tried to call for his own head, rising in rebellion against his king to avenge his family, having to marry his brother's former betrothed, a woman he neither loved nor cared for. All the while the lady he did love was miles away, carrying his daughter, a daughter who was murdered from within her mother's womb by a group of evil men, having a moment of weakness due to the madness happening around him, winning the war at the cost of so many lives lost, finding his sister, the sister he loved and had fought so hard to set free, only to have her die in his arms, going to the lady he had heard carried his son, only to also have her die. So much death and tragedy. Father, he asked, coming into the room after knocking,
might we talk?
It was still just afternoon, but John wanted to have this conversation before dinner.
Of course, son,
Ned said with a smile, putting down his quill and setting the parchment aside.
Come in. Is something wrong?
Not exactly, John said hesitantly. Well, I'm no good talking about feelings. And neither are you, so I suppose we're both in for an awkward conversation. You're starting to scare me, son. Adam told me, that day on the ship, why you don't like to celebrate your name day. Ned stiffened and then cursed under his breath. For a great night, Adam is worse than the town's telltale. Son, Father, please, let me say something first. I won't deny that there was some hurt after he told me, but I thought about it, and I can't even imagine how your head must have been like. Then I remembered what Rob told me about our older sister, and you were in a bad place, Father. I know that, and you tried to detach yourself, but what matters is that you recognized you were wrong, and ever since then, you never once let me feel like I was any less than your son than Rob. Except when I closed my eyes and let Gatlin. You let your wife handle domestic issues, Father, as every lord does. I do that too, though I suppose Danny pawns most of it off on Aunt Isla, since she hates dealing with it as well. But anyway, the point is that, as we grew up, you never once let me think that I was any less your son than Rob. Well, he was the heir, but still, you trained and taught us both equally. And I know this is not the rule for bastards. John, please don't. I know lords usually ignore or send away their bastards. But you didn't. Some will say that it's because the king betrothed Danny and I, so you needed to raise me right. But I know it wasn't that. The king only betrothed me to Danny because you had taken me in and brought me to King's Landing with you before we came home to Winterfell. So, back to your name day. You made a mistake, but you fixed it, Father. Don't let the ghost of this mistake haunt you any longer. Let's celebrate it. Please? Ned smiled, touched. You really are your mother's son, John, he thought. You couldn't be more like her if you tried. And if she had been there to raise you. You are my son, John, he said, putting his hands on the younger man's shoulders. You are as much my son as Rob, Bran, Rickon, and Cregan. Please, just don't ever forget that. Ever. I might have been stupid back then, but I have loved you from the moment Isla put you in my arms. You might not have my name, but you have my blood. You are my son, he insisted. John smiled, and they hugged. The next 2 days went by in a flash, and soon it was time to leave again. Lyanna spent the morning following Ned around, glued to his knees or at his arms, saying she wanted Grandpa to stay just a bit longer. When they went to board the boats to go downriver, the question about the direwolves was asked. Lady Nymeria and Shaggy Dog didn't even motion to leave the pier, but Silver jumped onto the first boat. I don't think it's a good idea for you to come with us, Ned said. The direwolf merely sat, showing he had no intentions of leaving the boat. That promises to be a funny fight with his grace, he said quietly, helping his wife aboard. At 4 moons along already, her bump was already showing beneath her dress, and he knew it would be even more obvious with the lighter dresses in the south. She chuckled. Cersei isn't there anymore, Ella said, and besides, it's one thing to complain about your daughter's pet, since you already agreed that a little girl had no business with a direwolf. It's quite another to say something against you. Ned huffed, but didn't say anything, checking to see if everyone had boarded their boats, and ordering the push-off. He really was not looking forward to the arrival at the castle, even if a little bird had whispered good news on the identity of the nursery attacker. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that one. Yeah, I like that chapter, but not much to report. Just a good one. Apart from, Isla being so protective of Lyanna, and that bit with John being so emotionally mature and taking a step back. I love that. Anyway, you guys know the drill. like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye, my guys, gals, and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Take care.